my customers are scared coming in here.
This deli manager, Ahmed, says one of the most dangerous jobs in the city is working in a deli, especially late at night.
It's a part of their job.
But it should absolutely not be.
So, New York City's beloved delis, they've been part of a growing crime wave, which isn't exactly new, as our laws protect criminals who never get sent to jail for stealing. However, now those same laws are being used to arrest the law-abiding, which is what's happened to several employees at stores like this one who've tried to stand up to thieves on their own.
A police search tonight for a repeat robber seen on video holding up the same bodega not once, not twice, but 3 different times.
It's been bad. We've been dealing with these guys all the time, but this time was different.
This time, they didn't leave without trying to fight.
Francisco did not know what he had in his hand could have been a knife. If he has to go to jail, I don't know what the kids are gonna do.
It all happened in less than 30 seconds. The 2 men walked into the A&H deli, picked up the ATM, walked out, and got into a van. His co-worker, too stunned to even act.
Deli owners we spoke to say it's hard right now to find people willing to work behind the counter in these conditions.
We having a problem. I don't have no deli man on weekends.
I think we need some security at the doors, especially the store that's open 24 hours.
And now police say this deli is just one of 20 that have been hit in an ongoing robbery pattern.
So local business owners in New York are controversially taking matters into their own hands when it comes to crime. And this is not the first incident of its kind, but what nobody's talking about is that prosecuting the innocent and defending criminals, that's been the new normal here for so long that it's not exactly new. And the last thing our progressive leaders want is for someone who has a business to stop someone who doesn't have one from robbing it. Now, of course, nobody wants vigilantes, and no store owner should try to take on criminals. They should call law enforcement. However, critics say that's what many business owners have been doing. Yet our laws release these very same crooks who oftentimes return to the scene of the crime, putting many owners and employees in a position where they say they've got their backs to a wall. And this is bewildering to many of us normal individuals. Why would a city defend criminals at the expense of businesses, many of whom are cornerstones of their community? That doesn't make any sense. Until, of course, you realize that New York City's legal system sees people not as criminals who rob and threaten the survival of our working class. Instead, they're seen as victims of a society that's been unfair to them in some way. And when they commit crime, our legal system takes the position that whoever their victims are probably deserved it for being financially independent. Which brings us to the real reason why there's this convenience store crime wave and why owners of these little places are getting in trouble for protecting themselves when law enforcement fails to arrive. It makes our leaders look bad for defunding the police, a decision which now appears to have made law-abiding society vulnerable to criminals, while at the same time our progressive leaders secretly see these criminals as those who need to be kept safe from society and its laws. However, as you're about to see, it's normal, hardworking people who need protection, and they're not getting it. So here we've got your little corner store, your deli, your bodega. They've got so many names, but all you need to know is that they basically function like an elevated version of 7-Eleven. This place has a salad bar. And in some parts of the city, these are the only places you can buy groceries because there aren't grocery stores, making stores like this the only option some folks have to get what they need to survive. But sadly, little stores like this have so many problems with crime, some of them may not survive.
He says the 2 men walked into the A&H deli on Ralph Avenue and Herkimer Street, picked up the ATM, walked out, and got into a van. His co-worker, too stunned to even act. Bilal says there are 2 ATMs in the deli. One is bolted to the ground. The other, the one that...
Okay, if criminals can do that and get away with it, nobody arrested, more of these businesses are going to look like the one behind me, which is closed. And to stop his store from closing, one store owner took matters into his own hands when criminals entered his business to try and steal from it. And he controversially used an item to defend himself that he says was left on the premises in inside one of the bathrooms by a criminal. And you see this bodega owner here, he was working at his store when two masked men entered, just like in that video we looked at, and started stealing. And to make matters worse, those men themselves were apparently armed. But even though the robbers who entered the store had illegal items of their own that they were going to use to assist them in their criminal endeavors, the owner, he was also doing something illegal by using the thing he found to defend the store and scare them off. On top of that, the owner of the store, who's being charged, says he found the illegal item in the bathroom of his shop 2 hours prior to the criminal activity taking place. And since the store owner did not have a license for such an item, this whole situation is wrong. He found it 2 hours before the criminals came into the store. It's a high crime area. He should have called the police, and had they been there, this whole situation probably wouldn't have happened, but the owner made a mistake by holding on to that thing that he found. Now, I'm not saying he's a bad guy. Nobody is. Everyone defending him says he's a great guy. He goes to church, he's got kids, and he just wanted to keep himself safe. But here's why this is controversial in this city. It's common for criminals to have charges against them dismissed or downgraded to the point where they're not actually criminals anymore. And here we've got a business owner who may not receive the same treatment from our justice system. And the reason this looks so unfair is because selective enforcement of laws against criminals is what many people say has led to robbery patterns like those we're witnessing. And now we've got a business owner that may suffer from selective enforcement. Either way, this is not the first time something like this has happened at a small business in recent months.
The store's surveillance video shows two young men walking in and splitting up inside Franja Wines and Liquors on Wyckoff Avenue. One of them tries to steal a large liquor bottle right in front of the camera, but owner Francisco Valerio and his brother Luis are onto them, grabbing them and telling the would-be thieves to get lost. This time, they didn't leave without trying to fight. One throws down his bag and...
So we're standing in front of a small, privately owned liquor store like the one in this story, which was getting robbed by criminals who could have been armed. And in this story, you have two repeat offenders who were well known to the owners of the establishment and had been caught stealing there before. Apparently, they entered the store and started putting items in their jackets when the owner and his brother spotted them and decided to escort them out, at which point things took a turn for the worst when the criminals decided that they didn't like being escorted out of a business they weren't done robbing. And one of the owners, who's now facing charges, was holding on to a registered item that he had on his person with a license to carry, which accidentally went off during the scuffle. It happened on the sidewalk right in front of the business. Multiple security cameras captured it. The criminal was not seriously injured, and the owner was licensed this time, but he's still being charged. And regardless of your stance on this story, this is another moment where we've all got to appreciate the fact that had the police been involved, things probably would have turned out differently. And in hindsight, everyone probably agrees that a couple of stolen bottles of wine would have been a small price to pay for all of the trouble everyone's going through now. But once again, the only reason this seems unfair is because the only one in this story with anything to lose is the store owner, not the criminals. They're not going to lose anything because of this.
Francisco did not know what he had in his hand could have been a knife. If he has to go to jail, I don't know what the kids are gonna do.
Tonight, Valerio's emotional...
Now, in hindsight, none of this is worth it. It's a shame. It's too bad the police couldn't get there. And now we've got two business owners who could lose everything, and their families are now in jeopardy. However, this brings up a larger question because violent criminals entered these stores and started doing something that was wrong. At what point does a law-abiding citizen have the right not to be taken advantage of? That's something that a lot of people want to talk about when they hear stories like this. And some people are saying that had these store owners not stuck up for themselves, things could have ended tragically for them. And the only reason the story doesn't go that way is because in both of these situations, things ended badly in a minor way for the assailants who were already doing the wrong thing. And defenders of these businesses want to know, at what point will well-meaning people who provide for their families and are not criminals, at what point will they stop being treated like them?
Valerio's emotional family and neighbors, with the support of the United Bodega Workers, are urging the Queens DA not to prosecute the 53-year-old father who has no criminal record.
New York is our witness. We're not asking the district attorney for anything. That's not fair.
Honestly, after watching something like this, realizing that here you've got somebody who was obeying the law and was licensed to have the item that they had on them at the time this went down, it really scares me. Like, what can you do if you're in a business and you're obeying the law and something goes wrong? Will you always be a criminal just because things didn't work out perfectly? And at what point will our laws have the backs of the law-abiding? That's something that everybody running a store like this wonders every time they hear about these stories. At the same time, I think we can all agree that some irresponsibility was exercised on behalf of all of the business owners we've talked about. But critics of the city's soft-on-crime policies would say, how is a reasonable person expected to behave in a situation that could be life-threatening? On top of that, all of these incidents took place because of the lawless environment that's been fostered by our justice system. And critics say until that changes, our crime problems in this city at little businesses like this are only gonna keep going in the wrong direction. So here we have a flashing security camera above the entrance to this CVS. And sadly, gimmicks like this are all that these stores can do in the face of rising crime and shoplifting that just will not stop. But as you look around this store and you see every progressive solution to crime installed and operating, like all of this plexiglass here walling off most of the store itself, it becomes pretty obvious that the way the city wants businesses to fight crime is to do it themselves, which is unfortunately not something every store is able to afford to do. First of all, you don't have the space to do something like this in one of those tiny little bodegas, leaving many of them with panic buttons as their only defense option, and as you're about to see, those don't do a whole lot.
United Bodegas of America standing together, taking it upon themselves to protect themselves after a string of violent attacks so far this summer.
Today, we are launching a pilot program where bodegas in New York City will be able to get what we've been asking for years.
So it's been about 5 months since these panic buttons were rolled out at some bodegas, and they're obviously not moving the needle a whole lot when it comes to crime, because crime in these places and in stores like this is still out of control and doesn't look like it's going to get any better until this city decides to put some money back into its police force, which is so short-staffed they can't respond to every robbery they get called about. And the problem is that even if they do respond to reports of crime and they do make an arrest, whoever it is the police do arrest oftentimes gets released and is right back out on the streets. And it's been almost 5 years since these decriminalization efforts first started off in this state, and many are now saying we've got all the proof we need that these efforts have failed. They've just led to more crime, which is why it should be surprising to no one that suspects busted in serious crimes are more likely to be rearrested under these reforms. This article quotes a study saying that 47% of those arrested for a felony were rearrested in the following 2 years since these reforms were enacted. On top of that, it shows that the number of accused felons who were rearrested for doing something really bad is up 3.3 percentage points than in years prior, revealing that recidivism among dangerous individuals is going up as our consequences for committing crime go down. And now we're just supposed to wait around for these criminals who could be anywhere to show up again in the future to their court dates, something that doesn't always happen, sadly.
The launch follows a string of violence at bodegas in just the last week. Though the tech could potentially cost taxpayers $3,000 per store per year, Councilmember Oswald Feliz wants to convince his colleagues to invest $15 million into the program.
Okay, so panic buttons, are those better than nothing? Yes, but they're not better than a system of justice that deters crime. Without a system like that, you could have all the panic buttons and flashing police cameras and security plastic you want. It's not going to change the trajectory of our crime problems. And the fascinating thing about this is that these decriminalization efforts, they were designed to protect criminals. But we just heard about 2 stories where criminals were not protected by these laws. In fact, they got injured when they went into stores and started stealing, revealing that a lawless environment just makes everyone less safe. And our justice system, it's failing these people by not intervening in their lives, acting as a deterrent from a crime-filled future that is just going to put them at risk. Think about that. Most of these people that are out there committing crimes over and over again, they've been failed at every level of society, and now the justice system that would finally be a consequence that could cause some to reflect on their lives and rehabilitate, that has been taken away from vulnerable members of our society. And without it, many people, they see no reason to change their behavior because nothing is going to come along and force them to do that. That's how you have people who've been arrested 10, 20, 30 times who are still out there. And look at this, 327 people were responsible for 30% of the crime in 2022. How is our justice system helping these people change their ways by giving them second chances? It's not, and it's putting the lives of those very criminals at risk, along with the owners and employees of all of the stores that these people are targeting. What do you think about that? Is the crime problem we have here because of our legal system, or should we change our legal system? Is it not progressive enough, and is that the real problem? Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.